All right, let's just get right to it. Modern Dungeons & Dragons, in a whole lot of the games it's inspired, are missing something. Something absolutely critical that makes an adventure feel real. That element is friction, and its absence is making our games thinner, safer, and you know what? Ultimately, a lot less memorable.
So ask yourself this: is your adventure too comfortable? Are your players just kind of gliding through the world? If the answer is yes, or even maybe, then you need to hear this. We've got to talk about why a little resistance is probably the best thing that can happen to your game.
And welcome to the Dungeon Master's Apprentice. This channel is about RPG design, consequences, and why games actually work at the table.
I mean, think about the default setting for so many modern games, right? Everybody has dark vision, so light is basically irrelevant. Nobody tracks weight, because that's just bookkeeping. You've got spells like Goodberry that turn the entire challenge of survival into a non-issue. Travel? Oh, that's just a quick narration. You travel for 3 days and arrive. The world just cooperates. It becomes a smooth, frictionless machine.
And here's the real problem with that. Your game stops being a story about survival, and it just turns into a sequence of encounters. It becomes a theme park where the players just move from one ride to the next, with no real sense of risk or pressure in between. The world stops being a character in the story and just becomes a painted backdrop.
You know, some people will argue that all that resource management is just tedious. But you know what's really unfun? It's when that entire struggle, the planning, the survival, is just hand-waved away. That struggle is where the story actually lives.
So what's the solution here? It's this missing ingredient I've been talking about: friction. That one thing that can turn a comfortable little tour into a genuinely gripping adventure.
Let's be clear about what I mean. Friction is the resistance the world puts on the players. It's all the subtle ways the world refuses to just make things easy. It's the dungeon itself pushing back on you, not just the monsters living inside it. It's the grit, the inconvenience, the simple reality of being a fragile adventurer in a really hostile place.
So what does friction look like when you're actually playing? Well, it's torches that actually burn out, plunging you into terrifying darkness. It's rations that you have to track because, yeah, starvation is a real possibility. It's that huge pile of gold coins that's way too heavy to carry out in one trip. It's spells that once you use them, they're gone for the day. It's the ever-present threat of a wandering monster that punishes you for taking too long. It's that cheap rope that might just snap when you need it most. This is friction.
And this is the core difference we're talking about. A frictionless game is just a sequence of encounters. Player skill really just comes down to your character build. The world is a theme park. But a game with friction? That's a story of survival. And in that game, player skill is all about creative problem solving, not just hitting the right button on your character sheet. The world becomes a genuinely hostile environment that you have to outsmart.
Okay, but how does this actually work? How does something as simple as counting your torches lead to better stories? Let's actually break it down.
Let's just take a single, humble torch. In a lot of old school games, it burns for about an hour. The second you light that thing, the entire game changes. An invisible clock just started ticking down. Time itself becomes a resource, and now every minute you spend searching a room or arguing over a plan, it costs you something real, your light.
See, this is the engine of adventure. It's so simple. First, a problem appears, born directly from friction. You're deep underground, and you just lit your last torch. Okay. This immediately forces a decision. Do we push forward, just hoping we find another exit? Do we retreat right now, maybe even abandoning the treasure we found so we can move faster? And out of that one decision, a story is born. Not a story about how much damage you did in a fight, but the story of that desperate, blind scramble back to the surface. I guarantee you, that's the moment your players will be talking about for years. Friction creates problems. Problems force decisions, and decisions, they create stories.
You know, someone once wrote that this isn't really a resource management game at its core, it's a decision-making game. Tracking your torches or your rations, that's not the point. The point is how that dwindling supply forces you to make hard, interesting choices. The resources are just one part of the calculus.
And this all leads to a much more fundamental idea about what an adventure even is. It isn't about being comfortable. Adventure is resistance. Modern play, with its heavy focus on balanced encounters and abilities that recharge after every fight, really treats combat like a sport. The goal is to show up and win a fair fight. It's the main event. It's the reason you're even there.
But old school play, the kind that really thrives on friction, it treats combat as war. It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it's absolutely lethal. The goal isn't to win a fair fight. The goal is to survive a hostile world. And a lot of the time, that means avoiding a fight entirely.
The contrast here is everything. In combat as sport, the fight is the fun part. You focus on your character's special abilities. But in combat as war, avoiding the fight is the interesting part. You focus on player ingenuity, using the environment, setting clever traps, figuring out a way around the enemy, because you know a straight-up fight is a massive, massive risk.
Which leads us to this provocative but absolutely essential idea from old school design: combat is a failure state. Yeah, you heard me. If you have to roll for initiative, it means you've failed. You failed to trick or trap or bypass or negotiate your way past the problem. You failed to be clever, and now you have to pay the price in blood and resources.
If you want more personal thoughts on RPG design and consequences, especially the ideas that don't always fit into a video, I write a short newsletter between uploads. There's a link in the description if you want that.
So why bother with all this? Why embrace this struggle? It's because of the payoff. Friction is what makes power feel earned.
Now, this kind of friction is most important right at the beginning of a campaign, when the characters are fragile. They aren't heroes yet. They're just tomb robbers and sellswords trying desperately not to die. They should have to worry about light and food. That vulnerability is the foundation that makes the power they gain later actually mean something.
Just think about the adventurer's journey. At level 1, you're terrified of the dark. You're counting every single torch. But by level 5, you can cast a spell that creates permanent light, and it feels like a monumental achievement. Why? Because you remember the darkness. Then at level 10, you cast Teleport, and it feels absolutely epic, because you remember all those long, hard journeys you used to have to take on foot. Friction creates the contrast that gives power its meaning.
Really, the entire argument for friction comes down to this one emotional truth. Power only feels meaningful when players have a visceral, gut-level memory of what it was like to be powerless. Without that initial struggle, power is just a number on a page.
So let's bring it all home. Modern game design often tries to sand away all the rough edges to create a perfectly smooth experience. But adventure was never meant to be a well-oiled machine. Adventure is resistance. It's the world pushing back, and the story being about how you found a way to push forward anyway.
So the real question for you is, what are you going to do to bring a little more resistance into your world? Until next time, adventure on, if you don't die.